Great, I can't wait for this podcast. It's going to be a good one.
We're rolling. Lawrence just having some orange juice.
Okay.
Are you ready? Great. Hello, and welcome to the Crown Lane podcast. It's Crown Lane on the record. We're up to episode 8. Here I am, Lawrence Bradshaw, sat next to
John Merriman.
We were listening the other day on our brand new screen that we've got in our kitchenette area of the studio, and I put the closed captions on, and the closed captions predicted your name was Joe Marman, which I've been calling you now for a week.
But I got you right, which was really annoying.
It was. I liked it very much. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I had a very, very good week.
Oh, good. I wasn't here for the last episode.
No, it was one of the best.
How was that? I knew that was coming.
We had a good time. We missed you.
We had so many complaints that I wasn't here. Yeah.
No, we managed all right. I enjoyed it. It was really good. It was all about universities and whether it's worth going to uni, whether studying music technology is the right choice. And we concluded it probably is for some, but very much look into the type of course that you're going to and the career that you want.
Good. If you didn't hear it, check it out. That was our episode 7. But for today, episode 8. And this is the first time we're doing anything like this because we're doing a un, deux, trois 3-parter.
And maybe 4.
A maybe cat. Wow. So we've got a 3-parter for you. So what is it about? We're calling it the process of recording. And we're going everything from the process of recording. Obviously, we're doing what it looks like signal pathways when you're actually capturing all that sound, through to the production side of it, and then the sculpting side of things, the mixing at the end. So this is part 1. Welcome to part 1, everybody. Is there any other business we wanted to talk about before we get straight in, John? Was there anything you wanted to mention?
The only thing I'd like to mention is why have we got so many drinks on the table?
We've got so many drinks on the table. Let's get straight into it then. So today's first part is all about the process of recording signal paths. What do we mean by that? What do you mean by that, John?
We use the term signal path, meaning that we're looking always at the entire route from source all the way to the mix and what we're listening to, the mix on, and what room we're listening to it in, and making sure that we're doing the absolute best we can at all those stages. So starting with what room we're recording in, what the musician's position in the room is, all the way through to the mics that we're capturing, the cables we're using, the outboard we're using, the software we're recording with, the resolution that we're recording at, and the computer equipment that we're recording it upon.
Okay. Something that you've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, and something that always gets banded around Crown Lane Studio, is a term called the Golden Channel. So avid listeners will have heard you speaking about the Golden Channel before. Thanks for listening, by the way. But for those who maybe haven't heard us talking about the Golden Channel before, let's go into that. What do you mean by it? And not that my beautiful orange juice that I'm looking at, that's my Golden Channel right now. What do you mean by the Golden Channel?
The Golden Channel is something that I think every engineer and every producer that is actually capturing sound works to achieve a channel that is, and I mean the aim would be to have all of your channels as golden channels, but in terms of money, your monetary level when you are recording, for example, at home, is going to be much smaller. And the Golden Channel is your best possible route from source to recording. So that everything on that is the absolute best. And we include in that the microphone stand as well, which sounds like a little silly thing, but if you're recording, for example, an audiobook, and you've got a mic stand that is just off Temu and it's slowly drooping over the course of a chapter, and then you need to do an edit point, yeah, you wouldn't notice the change gradually, but if you tried to put something in later, the sound difference with your microphone position would be an absolute nightmare. So all our stands here are really strong K&M stands that we love, and we also love them because they are fully sustainable, and you can order any part of any K&M stand and it will arrive within a week, and we love K&M for that because of their sustainability. Having stands that clamp and you know the position won't change is a really big part for us and for people who are recording even at home. You can have a really cheap mic but in a really good sounding room on a stand that is robust and never changing, and you will get really good consistent results. And that is often more important than having the best mic in a not great room.
Because that's an invisible change that can happen throughout the day that you just have no idea. And then when you're listening back to it, you think, why is it so different?
Particularly on a drum kit where you've got maybe we use 13 mics on the kit here.
Yeah.
And if one of those has drooped, you wouldn't necessarily have noticed it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm just going to go back a moment just because you mentioned Timo, just to make sure they're not a sponsor of ours because you badmouthed them. No, they're not a sponsor of ours. Great. Let's carry on.
And the other things are making sure you have got, as I say, the microphone. The microphone is the right microphone for the job. And then going through your desk, this is still the golden channel. I have my favourite channel on the desk, and that is just partly psychological, but I think everybody does. With analog equipment, it becomes a bit like if you've got an old second-hand car. Over time, you become... You know its little quirks. And on an analog desk, every channel on ours works perfectly, but some sound slightly different. But maybe psychologically.
Yeah.
Channel 3 is my favourite on our desk.
Why?
Oh, I just love it. It's never caused us any troubles. We've never had to replace it. It's never had any work done. We just love Channel 3.
Golden channel, golden child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would opt for that if I'm starting. Channels 1 and 2 are the ones that get most used. So often, even little things like XLR sockets on mixing desks, they always wear out on channels 1 and 2 because everyone goes to them first.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you're likely to have something cutting out, if you're doing some long-term stuff like an audiobook or you're working flat out and you want to guarantee the channel is going to be more robust, go for ones later on.
Yeah.
On the desk.
Because we have that, don't we, with our rehearsal spaces, that if we ever have to have our desks looked at and fixed, which we do, it's always 1, 2 and 3 which are the problems.
Yeah,
the
always.
problem children. Because everyone uses them.
And we had, I think we counted, we're coming up to 18,000 rehearsal bookings that have happened here.
Yeah.
And that number of people using the gear, and you all automatically plug into channel 1 and 2, which is understandable. But yeah, so a golden channel is often one further up, but the outboard gear you use as well, or even the simulated outboard gear that you're using, knowing that it is the best, and you're not just using, I'm using this compressor because I don't really understand compressors. You're using the right compressor for the right task. You're using the right EQ, the right preamp on the right desk, and you're monitoring through the right speakers, and you're seated on the right seat in the right position, the right monitoring position, and that is your golden channel all the way back to your ears, from source to your ears.
There's just so many variables, aren't there?
Totally.
For someone like you who's been doing this for such a long time to really get to grasp with how to get it perfect.
Absolutely. And our outboard gear, we would have, as many studios do, racks and racks and racks and racks of outboard gear that people just have and is on. And actually, when you hire a studio, if they've got racks and racks of outboard gear, you are paying for that. They're not paying for it. The customer's paying for that. We decided to keep our costs down by making sure that the only gear we have is the gear that we use regularly. And if we haven't used something for over a year, we get rid of it. So our actual racks are quite small. And most of it now, we've opted for software equivalents. We love the Universal Audio console, which means that it's a horrible term, destructive, but you are recording through software compressors at source. So as the sound comes in, we compress or we EQ, and we take the gamble there and then that we've got it right. And we make sure that what is then printed into Pro Tools is already compressed, and we can see visually on the screen, that is a perfectly recorded vocal. We're really, really happy with that. So that, over time, console has become part of our signal chain as well, and we are very grateful to Universal Audio. And there was one guy there, actually, who said years ago to us, you'll get to like console over time. And at the beginning, I was like, this is so confusing. We're recording. I just want to use Pro Tools. Can't we just go straight into Pro Tools? Why do we need to go through console first? But what console is like a real desk, but in digital form. So when you go through it, you can opt just by pressing one button on each plugin that it is either just letting you hear what it does, but it's non-destructive, or it's destructive in that what then gets past it to Pro Tools will be printed exactly how that plugin has operated on that audio. So that's become part of our signal path now.
If you could make me dumb it down, really,
Yes.
make almost like a flow chart of starting from the sound source, and let's pick one at random. We're going to go into a couple more in a moment, but if we pick vocals, imagine we've got a singer coming in and they're just laying down some vocals. From that mouth all the way to the final product, or the end point of the signal path, what are we looking at as we go along?
Firstly, their mic position, the right pop shields as well. So some pop shields are too fierce and they actually take too much of the air out of the voice. And I can feel a sort of dullness when they're being recorded. So making sure that the singer's the right distance, the right pop shield, on the right stand, and also using the right mic. So where with a vocal you might be using a valve mic, which adds all the nice distortion to the sound. By that I mean that the more power that a singer sings with, the more it sort of crunches and just sounds gorgeous. You can't hear it as distortion, you just hear the coloration of the sound, which is something that is brilliant if that's what you want, but you can't take that off later. So it might be that you've got a different mic. So starting again, we've got the singer, the right distance, the right pop shield, the right stand, the right mic. Through the shortest cable, you don't need really long cables that run the risk of interference or damage. Through to the golden channel on the desk, let's say channel 3 for us.
Why wouldn't we?
And you inserting into that any of the outboard gear that we use. So we often use the AMEC Neve 9098, which is a preamp and EQ unit. And we often use that, although we love the Orum's EQ, and we use that on every single instrument. If we were going through our golden channel, we might use the Air, it's called Sheen on the AMEC, which just has a brightness that is a nice air for a lead vocal, and then you can just dial that back for the BVs so that the BVs sit just behind the lead. I like that. And then we use the Warm 1176 replica, which is really great as a compressor on vocals, on anything really. But we use that a lot. I love Warm because they're so fast with repairs as well, and being that things have to go back and be fixed, that after sales is really, really important as well. And then that goes to through console. So we use any of the sort of destructive plugins on that, into Pro Tools with the correct channel strip. But most of that we would add later. That's sort of the production side, which we'll talk about next month.
Yeah.
That all happens in there. And then the nice monitoring. So we use our Genelecs, and we've loved Genelec right from the beginning here at the studio.
Yeah, that's often something that whenever I give a studio tour, that people say, "Oh, you got Genelecs in."
We love them. We've even got them in the coffee shop.
Yeah, there's not many coffee shops that have Genelecs.
No, and hidden subs as well built in, which is sometimes we are a little excessive.
Yeah,
but
really
sounds great.
On that note, then, something that I've thought before, something that Chris and I brought up a few months back, actually, which is the danger, perhaps, of being in the studio setting, being at Crown Lane Studio. You've done this vocal performance. You come into the control room and you listen back to it, and you've got this really, really incredible acoustically treated room and these amazing Genelecs, and you're hearing it, just stunning sound.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is there a danger then that you're listening to it in too good of an environment, that actually when you go back home, you might not have that set up at home, and you're listening back to it on a smartphone, I'll call it, speaker, or your computer speakers, or whatever it might be, and then you think, oh god, this doesn't sound nowhere near as good. Why is that?
So we used to use some Westlake audios. A lot of people have Oratones as well, which is speakers that will just give you a very, very, very flat response. They're really hard to work with, or the Yamaha NS10s, for example. You have to work really hard to make them sound good. And then when you've made them sound good on those, you go back to Genelecs and you go, oh, that's brilliant. And of course, it's always better because they're great speakers that you can hear every last detail. But you're completely right that the environment that most people listen in is not a perfect environment. And even if it is, the place that you're sitting is probably the optimum place, but the person that's sitting next to you is probably less than optimum, and the person behind you is not prime either. So we used to always use these alternate speakers, and then we discovered this plugin called Mix Checker. It's quite expensive for what it is, but all it is 8 buttons on a plugin that we have all the time on our master channel, and they simulate different things. They simulate an Apple iPad speaker, an iPhone, a car, a radio, earbuds, the Apple earbuds, the original wired ones. And it's just such a good opportunity to leave the mix on that setting, on one of those. So I often have it on the car one and realise, yes, the bass is slightly too strong or slightly too weak in that context, and sort of fix it while it's in that context, then go back, bypass that plug-in. We're back to perfection in the room again, and it hasn't ruined it by improving it for the people who are listening in the car. And then go to the iPhone speaker, because even though the iPhone and Samsung's latest models are all stereo, by the time you got it propped up by the sink, for example, and you've got your phone in front of you, it can be giving a stereo signal, but what you are hearing is the sum of it, because the speakers are far too close together to give you a good stereo image by the time it reaches you. So we check in mono as well all the time. So the desk has got a mono button on it, and we'll often track in mono and mix in mono, and then gradually put things on the stereo panorama so that we can enjoy the placement of things, but always checking back that iPhone setting on the mix checker plugin.
And it's so dramatic, isn't it? I mean, when I first started working in, I'd sit in these sessions, and then you'd show one of our clients what it will sound like on an iPhone. I'm like, don't show them that. It sounds crazy different. It's like, well, no, that's the truth of, how most people consume music and listen to it these days.
It's very true. And I have this temptation always to put the lead vocal too hot, because I love a vocal that's too hot. And it's always putting in the iPhone context that you realise, because of the way they're designed now, that speech is so clear, it enhances the voice even more on an iPhone. So I'm nearly always embedding the vocals slightly further back than I wish in the final mix so that it works well on iPhone as well. And even at the mastering stage, mastering generally makes the vocal bed into the song a little better anyway. However, with the mix checker on, we make sure that, that's pretty much going to be as we want it on the iPhone or Samsung.
Great. Well, we're going to take a break in a moment. Before that, I've got a little challenge for you, John.
For me?
For you. This first part, we've been talking basically about the context of in a studio. Part 2, after the break, we're going to be talking about how you can get better results at home and your signal flow at home. But before we go to our break, I don't know why I did that voice. You couldn't see John's eyebrows then, but they went up quite dramatically when I started doing that silly voice. I'm going to ask you some quick-fire questions.
Now.
Ready. About signal flow. I'm going to pick some random instruments, voicings. How would you best set up?
Oh, great.
But you're only getting 30 seconds. I'm going to be quite strict on this as well. Okay?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Your first one?
Yeah.
Best signal flow for a solo rapper.
A solo rapper. I love the Shure SM7B mic, which is a gorgeous dynamic microphone, and I'd put it through what's called a cloud lifter. They've now designed their own because they've realised that cloud lifter, the company, are getting loads of money for the cloud lifter, which is basically an enhancement of the SM7B to make the gain high enough so that when it gets into the rest of the signal path, which I described earlier, it will work brilliantly on rap vocals.
Wait, how long did you think that was?
22 seconds.
It was 21 seconds.
Oh!
Well done. Very good. Okay, next one. Let's pick another one. We're going to go for rock bass guitar. Go.
Oh, interesting. I really love, there's a DBX DI box called a DB12, which is quite an old one, and every bass sounds great through that. And it's just a DI box. So you can go straight into that, into the system. That's probably the cheapest way we would do it if you're doing it at home. I love the Sansamp bass rack unit. They make a pedal of it, which works really well live, but the rack unit is just gorgeous. So it means that a bass player can sit in the control room and plug their bass in, and they will hear in the control room how it will sound when it gets to the finished mix.
Okay, great.
31 seconds was that.
I actually forgot to push the button on that one, but I was acting like I was hovering over it to make you speed up.
It worked.
It worked. Okay, your next one is going to be 30 seconds on the clock. What about if you're recording a harp?
Harp. Oh, gosh. Remember the harp, that although it looks like the player's playing forwards, the side is a really good place to be recording it from. You've got more space there and you're not going to be in their sight lines. The sound comes out of the soundboard at the bottom, so you need to be above that. Use your ears, shut your eyes, you'll hear where the sound comes from to get a nice balanced sound. Definitely get a DI if it's got a DI output on it. Some of them have 3 or 4 different DIs for the 3 different bits of the harp, the higher, middle and the low. Some just have one. I would definitely get a DI, but also mic it with maybe a ribbon, stereo pair and a condenser.
Great. 30 seconds. Let's do one more before we go to our ad break. I'm looking forward right now, right in front of me, our Yamaha U3 upright acoustic piano. That's what we're talking about. Your 30 seconds begin now.
Sneaky, we stole an idea from Tiny Desk, which are probably the nicest sounding uprights. And there's a whole video on it online, how they record the Tiny Desk upright piano. And it's the soundboard, again, similar to the harp. Go around the back, use your ear, put your ear relatively near it. And there's a sweet spot near the bottom, middle of the soundboard, which sounds gorgeous. If you use a ribbon mic, they're like an ADHD child where if they're good, they're really good. If they're not, because they pick up the sound from the rest of the room as well, they're like just distracted by everything else. If you get it right, that'll sound great on the back. Stereo ribbon in the room as well, and I use 2 condensers to get a nice stereo wide sound at the front as well.
Great. Just went over there. Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks for that, John. Let's pick up again in the second half of this. I think we need to definitely take a break to get through some of these drinks that we've got on our table.
Passionate about podcasts and sound? Dive into the Sculpt Mixing course. Developed over 2 years, this online course delivers top-tier mixing tips straight from our bustling commercial studio. With guided videos, downloadable audio content, and a comprehensive handbook, you'll elevate your skills at your own pace. Visit crownlanestudio.co.uk/education and enter podcast special at checkout for an exclusive 30% discount. At Crown Lane, we help you sound better. Download now and let's get back to the episode.
Welcome back
Hey! No?
You right there?
I was just excited to be back.
Oh, good. That really... Oh, no, I won't talk about that. I won't talk about your gigging etiquette that I found out the other week. But
you can't say that and then not share it.
Okay, well, we went to a gig last week and it was the first one that really I've been to with John. And...
It was a great night.
It was such a good
Loved
night.
every minute of it.
We had a really, really good night.
We had to separate on the way home because we were being naughty. We self-disciplined.
And when we say separate, we mean on the Northern Line, picking two different carriages. No, but John waits for the perfect moment when when a band, everyone's cheered and whooped and really enjoyed it at the end of a song. And the lead singer says, right, okay, the next thing. And then you went, yay! On his own.
Well, I like that. If you listen to a live album, you want to hear yourself, don't you?
Yeah, you always think, oh, God, who's that person? He can't help
It's
it.
always me.
Who's desperate to be on the live
always
album?
me. No,
Anyway.
I just get excited. I love live music.
Okay, and live podcast recordings, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yay! Welcome back.
You did it again. Classic John. Okay, we are back. We are talking about signal flow, the process of recording of part 1, talking about signal flow. Before the break, we were talking about studio setup, but now we're going to talk about home studio setup.
Absolutely. So many people record at home. I record at home. You've recorded at home.
Yeah,
the pandemic meant that everyone had to. And I spent a lot of time training people during the pandemic. There was one particular occasion where I was working with a beautiful organisation called Sing Space that worked with singers all around the world, particularly West End and theatre singers. And I did a training on how to record well at home. And we did it in real time. And we took one singer who was brave enough to get a few things ready in the background, just in case we needed them as props to make their recording better. And over Zoom, we created the most beautiful recording setup for her that she's used ever since. So that was back then. A lot has changed in the world of recording. And now you can do, Zoom then was catching up. It didn't even have its, what's it called? Instrument sound? Musicians. Sound for musicians. It didn't have that back then. And that's a hugely useful tool when you're trying to get at least a rough idea of how things sound at home. But in the actual context of creating sound at home, well, it's all about the acoustic. And there are two sides to that. It's about having quiet enough space, so that's soundproofing, and a space that actually sounds nice, which is all about acoustic treatment. And one doesn't work without the other. If you've got a beautiful sounding room that's acoustically treated, but you can hear the M1 going past outside, it's useless.
Yeah.
And equally, if you've got a room that is totally soundproof, like a bunker, but inside it's cavernous and every sound echoes, then as well.
You just locked yourself in with the enemy, basically, haven't you?
It's game over. Yeah. So, you need both those things. And they often get confused and people think straight away of, I need to put some egg boxes on the wall. Yes, that is acoustic treatment. Absolutely. Will it stop any sound leaking or coming in? Not at all. It will do very little for the soundproofing of the room, but it will do lots for changing how sound behaves. And I think if you're recording at home, to have a basic understanding of acoustics is more important than having the best quality microphone. And in terms of microphones, you just need a workhorse mic that will work in every context. Here, we're lucky enough to have a cabinet with every single mic in it. And even if you're at home and you think, I want one that's versatile for everything, like the Stephen Slate mics, they're brilliant because they simulate all the classic mics. And so you buy one that's like the robot unit that you speak into, and then that simulates really well. And in blindfold tests, it's very hard to tell the different mics that it's simulating. It's great. However, when you're at home, the reason you need different mics is normally because you're doing multiple things. And if you're recording multiple things, well, you need more than one mic anyway. And then what do you do? Buy loads of Stephen Slate mics, which is incredibly expensive. Or do you make sure you've got the right mic?
The right mic, mate?
Right.
We'll leave that in.
For
I
our
think you just
Australian
went
audience.
Australian all of a sudden.
Absolutely. And they'd probably be using Rode, one of the greatest Australian companies in the world. Anyway, sure, which doesn't come from Australia.
I saw the moment that you realised what you did.
Microphones are really important that you've got the right one. A workhorse microphone at home is crucial, and have one that does everything. Condenser microphones are probably the best, but genuinely, although it doesn't look the coolest, an SM58 or an SM57, they're just so good for everything. And we could, in most cases, use an SM58. There are brilliant mic shootouts on Instagram. If you just type in mic shootout, you'll see some. And when you hear the SM58, and don't judge it by what it looks like, and the SM57, they just sound perfect on so many things that have the right mic, yes, a workhorse mic, but your room has got to be right.
Yeah.
So look at the acoustics of your room, and the three things you need to consider when you're recording at home are absorption, how much of your room is absorbing sound, reflection, how much is giving your sound back again, but obviously later than the source, and how much of it has been diffused, i.e. sent in different directions. Diffusion is like nature. You go outside and nothing is shiny flat lines, and also nothing is fluffy that it's absorbing everything as well. It's random shapes, random sizes in nature, and rooms that have more objects in them, there's more diffusion going on. So the actual sound in the room is slightly nicer to listen to because it's more natural. But a balance of the three will give you the character. Reflection gives you most of the character in a room, but it's the hardest to work with because it's always giving back signal. And in a studio context, like we're currently in room 3, which is one of our most dead rooms, great for recording vocals because it's even across all frequencies. So it's got a great balance of, I'm looking above me to a ceiling that diffuses. We've got a curtain that diffuses as well and absorbs. And then we've got about 12 panels that just absorb the sound in this room as well. And having the room carpeted makes all the difference as well. But there's still a lot of the room left to be hard surfaces, reflective surfaces. And that balance makes for a really lovely room. And you'd have to get into acoustics if you want to design the perfect space at home. But don't just think you need everything completely dead, though that is useful. You probably want a bit of charm. It's very hard to sing as well in a space that's completely dead. It's not a nice acoustic. And an anechoic room is the definition of full absorption, where there is absolutely nothing given back. And singers and humans, two different categories.
Dog and cat singers we're talking to as well.
Can't survive very long in an anechoic chamber. They're not a very nice space to be in. You can hear the blood inside your head, and very soon you start to go mad and leave. There are records for how long people have spent in there, but it's not very long, actually. So the absorption is a part of the formula. So get the acoustic right, I would say, at home is the main thing, and make sure your soundproofing is as good as it can be.
You'd prioritise that over gear?
Always. Even to record into your phone at different distances, it's such a good thing. We always do this when we're doing training here. You get a phone mic and you hold it close to your voice and you record whatever you're trying to capture, and then hold it even at arm's length, and then put it at 2 arms lengths away. Obviously you can't reach that because it's beyond your arm's length.
2 arms length.
And leave it there and record. It sounds almost, your brain does so much of the work to understand distance with sound, and our eyes give us so much of the illusion that things are closer and clearer than they are, which you don't have with the microphone. The microphone is just captures what it captures. And remember that the mic on a phone is also trying to do digital stuff with it as well. It's trying to use AI to make things sound better than it is. So there's a lot of manipulation going on there. But even with that going on, it is only how close it is and the acoustic of the room that will make anything different, rather than having the best mic or an average price mic.
One of my favourite things that you said on this podcast before, because I do listen to what you say, John, was that it was right back in our first episode where we touched upon a couple of these little things. You were saying about the reflection when you're recording at home, it was mainly for voiceover artists, and saying that you're looking around your room at eye level and you're looking down and, I've got a wooden floor, put a rug down because you don't want to make new carpet just for a recording. And that people aren't looking up because your ceiling, if you've got a nice big ceiling, sound doesn't know which direction up and down is.
Gravity is irrelevant.
It's such a great point to make, and I often think about that. And after you said that, Like
ceiling. The ceiling in room 2 here is one of our favourites. So room 2 is the brightest room here, and bands generally like that because they sound great in there. When you're playing bass in there, it doesn't matter if you get the odd wrong note, it still feels really lovely. The room just works. It's got 2 bass traps in the corner. It's got diffusion panels all over the ceiling and an absorption curtain the full length of the room. So it's a great room and really versatile. You can open the curtains and you get even more reflection back. And it sounds great if you're in a band, but all your mistakes, they're just sort of covered over. It just sounds and feels great. Like a choir in a church. They always prefer singing in a church. And when they come to the studio to record, they can hear every last problem. So here in room 1, which is an almost idyllic context to record in, I love recording in there. All the walls are different angles. The ceiling's different angles. The room has enough absorption to sound great, but enough diffusion as well. That room for recording is gorgeous, but you hear every little slip, which is what you want when you're recording.
Yeah.
But rehearsal bands struggle more in room 1 unless they're aware that this is a good environment because you can hear all your problems and sort them out.
Yeah, I prefer room 2 when I'm playing.
Same.
So if you are recording from home and you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I don't want to remodel my house and change the angles of the walls and put carpet on my ceiling and all these kind of things, maybe you could come down to Crown Lane Studio to record here.
Absolutely. And even if you just want to do it on the cheap, you can book one of the rehearsal rooms and bring your recording gear here and use it. And we have a lot of people do that.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, it's always a nice option, isn't it? Because sometimes, people don't always think through their budget and presume that it's going to be X amount of money, and then they turn up and it's slightly out of their budget. And we often give that as an option. Come and record from home in the studio.
Yeah.
Bring your own gear, bring an interface, bring your own laptop, and just use the rooms. And it's a really nice space to do
it's
it.
very popular.
Yeah. And we like that, and we
endorse it.
We endorse it. That's what I was trying to say. Thanks for that, John. Right, I think we're kind of coming to the end now.
Oh.
I think we've covered quite a lot in a short amount of time. Before we do end, a couple of little bits. Any recommendations?
What were you going to say?
No, I'm going to start off. I'm going to loop back to our gig that we went to because the people that we saw were Bellowhead, one of my favourite bands of all time.
Oh, won't you come down? Won't you come down? Won't you come down? Which town?
I said Yarmouth, but
okay, I went rap.
Really, really enjoyed it. It was the company made it very nice, but they're such a brilliant band. They've disbanded. This was a little reunion one-off gig. But do listen to their music. It's really, really wonderful and joyous and great.
But I mean, for me, yes, that was a highlight. I had quite a luxury, though. I accidentally, in booking gigs, which often happens months and months in advance, I had 4 land in alternate days. So I had a day off between each of 4 gigs, which was pretty full on. Started off with a Haydn and Mozart gig with, can you call it a gig? Concert at Milton Court up in town, part of the Barbican. And that was gorgeous. That was 2 musicians that I'd never heard of as well. 2 composers, Van Hal and Dittersdorf. And they were in a quartet with Mozart and Haydn. And they played together. And apparently there's a review of their quartet. I mean, this is hundreds of years ago. But the performance was terrible, apparently, but it was 4 geniuses, but it didn't come together all that well, and Mozart was on the viola for it. It sounds like a dream, but this thing happened. And then they decided to do a concert of the 4 of them, their music. So it was a piece of Haydn that I'd never heard before, fell in love with, which was gorgeous, and Dittersdorf, gorgeous compositions, but you do realise why Mozart and Haydn were 2 of the greatest when you hear them against some of their contemporaries. So that was the first one. Then I had a day off, and then I went to Palladium and saw Bellowhead, and that was a tremendous night. I did slip over midway through. I got far too excited.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
They had glossy brochures on the floor. It was the most dangerous thing I've ever...
And John was jumping up and down, as was I, and John slipped over. And normally I really revel in the fact of taking the mick out of John. However, I thought it was so embarrassing that I pretended that I didn't see it. Till we got on the tube on the way back and really laid into him for it.
Man, yeah, I laid into the guy behind me as well, which was a lot of fun. And
Genuinely did.
And then I had a day off, and then I went to see Mez and Me at Paper Dress Vintage. What a gorgeous venue. Downstairs is the women's department.
Where is it?
It's up in Hackney.
Oh, okay.
And it's a clothes shop downstairs, and then they push all the clothes to the side behind a big velvet curtain, and it's a bar for the evening. And you go upstairs. The sound system there is stunning. It sounds gorgeous, and that was a really great night. Is a guy who's formerly known as Ajimal, doing his new album under the new name of Mezzanmi. And then I had a day off. And then I went to the Jazz Cafe in Camden, one of my favourite venues.
Amazing venue,
I love it. And I saw a South African artist called Tandiswa, and that was a great night. I loved that. That was more of an experience. It was like there were whole. It wasn't just the music. It was a whole immersive experience that was just second to none. Love that. So I don't know if I have a recommendation, but
those
I'd
venues
say
at least.
Milton Court, Palladium, Paper Dress Vintage, and Jazz Cafe Camden.
Wonderful.
All of them stunning in their different ways.
Yeah, love it. Nice. Okay, well,
What about your recommendation?
I really did it, Bellowhead. This shows how often you listen to me, doesn't it? Let's just leave a little bit of silence for awkwardness.
You've done that twice to me. Lawrence made someone be quiet in the office, and no, don't respond. Let him simmer in this.
Let him know what he's done. Don't think about it.
You got to cover my
You
back.
can tell we're both ex-teachers, can't you? Right, yeah, that's that. On the next episode, we're going to be doing part 2 of our process of recording, looking at mostly the production side. Once you've captured what you've captured, and then what can you do with it in the control room during your sessions?
Absolutely.
Tips and tricks. That sounds great. Thank you very much, John. Well, until then, that's all there is to say.
And we're going to have a workshop for all 3 of these at the end of the 3 episodes.
That's a really good point. I'm looking at my notes here. I wrote them, and it says that, and I just thought, I'll finish it without saying it. We're going to have a workshop. Can we edit that out so it doesn't make me sound bad? Nah. Oh, you're doing what I do to you.
Absolutely.
Good, okay,
That is staying in.
I've now thought about what I did and I made a mistake. Yes, at the end of these 3, we're going to do a nice big workshop to round it off, including all 3 things. That'll be really nice, actually, when we do that. That'll be in the new year, 2025. Do.
See you then.
See you then. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.